Call the meeting to order. It is Tuesday, May 14th at 5:35 p.m. Want me to go over the agenda? Yeah, so the agenda is, the first item is approve the minutes from the March 21st, 2019 meeting.
So moved. point is, we need to tie it down as a district to state what our position is to ensure people are.
Yeah, I get it. If you want any of the data I have from 2007, everybody.
Oh, this has been going since then, huh?
Yeah, 600,000.
Year to date, it's 600,000. It's just that we don't manage it, we can manage it. And
Right.
then we're gonna be out there exposed looking crazy.
They also have some of the controls that are, so you might know all
But
those
we
already.
haven't set district
No, no,
control, so we
exactly.
need to either jump on or say no. Right, so that is really what
I'm
happens.
just saying, I have some documentation.
Wonderful, thank you.
As always, we begin our meetings with an act of reverence and the Pledge of Allegiance. You all know what I'm going to do, but we don't have any young people here today. Well, maybe we do. Look at, you know, when I do this, people kind of like look away and like, I hope he doesn't pick me. Beth, you're pretty young. Come on up here and lead us in the pledge. Come on, give Beth a round of applause. I'm picking on you, Beth, because that phone buzzer thingy you got going on your phone, I felt like I was in like Catholic church or something. Her phone rings, what is that, the cathedral, Westminster? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just very briefly, again, it says act of reverence. We all, and I promise I won't speak long, but I was experiencing some stuff today, and I've had the opportunity to speak to some of my colleagues about struggles that they have had, and certainly in my own family, we've had some struggles. You know, we do this act of reverence often when something happens big in the nation, and we turn our attention and we say prayers and good wishes. But a lot of that stuff is happening to our own family and friends and people in courthouses and job lines, unemployment lines, Department of Labor, and we don't throw up prayers for them. I know on this dais and in this community, there are people who need our prayers and meditation. And we don't need a tragedy on the headlines on CNN to know that we have loved ones, all of us, friends, associates who we work with. Many of us here work in the human service industry and field, and we see the challenges that people face. So let's take just a brief second to think about all those folks. And it can be something in your own family, or something in your own profession, or something you just saw as you came into the building. Let's just spend a quick moment to think about those folks and put them in our prayers and thoughts. All right, we do not have any minutes to be approved. Actually, we do not have our clerk. Where did she go? I think Francine. I did see her. I'm just.
I think she went to go grab more copies, she said.
Okay, perhaps we should wait for Francine to come back.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I was just looking at the agenda, and it says that this is a business meeting, but I thought our business meetings were on Thursdays, and this is supposed to be a special meeting. I'm just trying to understand why there's resolutions on here. Like, are we passing resolutions at special meetings, or we're doing them to board business meetings? And then also, why we're doing a review of resolutions that we're going to be voting on May 23rd? Like, I'm kind of confused about this agenda.
You'll notice that the packet of resolutions is white. It's the same as our Friday packet. We're not voting on this packet. In fact, the resolutions that usually go through the Finance Committee, I met with Everton, as I always do for like a pre-Finance Committee meeting, and those are here. We're not voting on them.
No, okay, but so there's two lines. If you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, it says review of resolutions that are going to be presented at the May
Exactly.
23rd. but why are we doing a review? That's, we've never done a review of resolutions we're going to be voting on beforehand that I'm aware. But then, if you go 3 down further, it says resolutions are in here, 834.
But that's only one.
That's only one, and that relates to our, isn't that the one that relates to our superintendent?
I don't know what the
Number is.
but it should be.
Francine,
Okay.
that's the one that relates
Yes,
to
it
our
is.
would-be.
Okay,
So that's the
okay,
only
so there's
one.
clarity on why we're voting. Okay, but the agenda says business meeting, but this is a special meeting.
Well, as Carl has told us, a meeting is a meeting is a meeting, no matter what
So
you
they're all
call it.
called business meetings, Carl?
No,
Go ahead, yes, please, thanks.
I mean, we listed on our website as a special meeting versus the board business meeting, so I'm just trying to understand.
there is really no distinction other than a special meeting is normally related to a specific item as opposed to a business meeting where a variety of things can be considered, notwithstanding the agenda. But special meetings are normally limited to their agenda. That's the distinction between a general meeting or a business meeting and a special meeting. The other thing that the board has been doing lately is a work session, but a work session is also a meeting, hence Dan's reference to, my quote, that a meeting is a meeting is a meeting. Whenever the board is convened to transact public business, it is an official meeting under the open meetings law.
Right, but the work session was technically a special meeting
That's
because we
correct.
have a specific agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
But I thought that's what we were doing on Tuesdays, were special meetings, and then the board business meeting was twice a month on Thursdays.
Well, if this meeting was posted with a specific agenda, then the meeting is limited to that agenda, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clarity and understanding as to why we have so many agenda items and then also just resolutions. The one on the superintendent I have clarity on, but even reviewing resolutions that we're going to be voting on May 23rd.
Excuse me, Commissioner LeBron, I just want to add something. The review of resolutions to be presented at the May 23rd board meeting is so if you have any questions, you can ask them now. I talked to Shanae, and she said that we should put them in there in case you had any questions. So if you want to review them, and if you have any questions, you could probably ask those questions now.
Just in support of that, the logic was, rather than having these things stuffed in your mailbox or delivered, and sometimes days before the vote, or before the weekend, there should be an opportunity for, if people want to ask questions. You don't have, I don't think this is supposed to be a substantive examination of each and every resolution, because it's quite hefty. I think it was just
Right.
done there to provide some mechanism for the board to ask questions if it wanted to. Of course, you don't have to. And then the other one, as you correctly pointed out, is 834, and that is on by reason of
That's
necessity.
a special, yeah, that's a special
And
exception.
then the other things that are on the agenda, there is the, it says announcement of the other meetings, and then we have some executive session stuff, and then the presentation of African-American Studies curriculum, that was requested.
I know, I
So
requested it multiple
that's
times.
pretty much it.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so we have no speakers addressing an agenda item. Next item on the agenda is just a review of the resolutions for the May 23rd, 2019 board meeting. Now, and again, if you haven't had a chance to review them, no harm, no foul. You can always, of course, ask questions, but does anybody have any questions?
Some of these are resolutions you would ordinarily see in our Finance Committee meeting, but since we don't have one, the only thing I will call out to you is that Resolutions 875 and 876 have dollar amounts indicating how much was spent in each of these categories in prior years. I think there might be a typo where one was used as a template for the other. Everton, did you have a chance to look into that, or Tim?
Can I speak from here?
No, you need to be, thanks.
Nice try, Tim.
So what you're referring to is the snow plowing, and they're both the same contract. So that dollar amount represents what we spend in total for that contract. So there's two different companies. So if you see the first one, Manal, the second one, Tandor, they both do work for us, and they both service different groups, different school buildings. So the totals you see are going to be identical because it's representing what we totally spent for that contract. It's almost a 50-50 split as far as spend goes between the two, so
So it's not a typo?
it's not a typo.
Okay.
Okay, so-
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
It looked so, I mean, it's so seldom that we see numbers that are absolutely identical.
Everton, did you want to present this? Okay. Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And just, good afternoon, everyone. Before we go on that, those two resolutions, if you notice in the resolutions, they break the district into zones, and the one group cover, you see like A, D, A, B, D, H, and L, and the other company covers the other C, E, F, G, and all that stuff in that. So as it relates to our financials, you know, we have some brief presentation in front of you. If we go to the presentation, starting on page 4, you will see where we have our breakout of our funds, and the changes that are happening for the month of April is about a $3.3 million change. $1.5 million in the general fund, $1.3 million in the special aid fund, and $400,000 in the lunch fund. The general fund, we have two items in the general fund, a $1 million for stop loss. What we budgeted for a stop loss from our health insurance, we had some claims.
I'm sorry, Everton, this is the form
This.
that you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody knows.
Everybody got
Okay.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's not what they're showing
No,
up
it's
there, but,
this.
okay.
Presentation was sent to you. Got it? I think Francine sent that.
I sent it
to
in
you.
ICC, Everton.
You got it? About 5:15. Oh, so if you turn to your presentation on talk about page 4 just now, but on page 5, it explains what each of those items are. So for the general fund, there is an additional $1 million for stop loss for health insurance, and that's the result of having additional claims that came in over and above the threshold of $500,000. We had budgeted a certain amount based upon historic numbers, but we had a couple claims that came in above that, so we have that extra amount that our stop loss insurance picks that up and reimburse us for that. What we use that for is to offset our insurance claim, our health insurance claim, because if the claim is coming in and it's under $500,000, we don't get any reimbursement. If it's over that, we get the excess of that, so we use that to offset our expenditures. So we float that right back in. The additional $0.6 million is increase in BOCES reimbursement, and BOCES have a process that when they go back and look at their prior year, if the claims that we paid for were less than what the actual expenditures, they give us that money back, but it's on a lag time, so that's why that is included in prior year adjustment, because it's not for current year, it's for prior year. So that's what the $600,000 is for. As it relates to the special aid fund, as you go into your detail packet, you'll see the $1.1 million increase in Title I and IDEA, and then the .2 is just other local sources. For food services, the $400,000 is the result of a settlement that we've had from a prior year. So those are the items that are driving the budget amendment that we will be putting forward to the board that will be voted on next Thursday. And as you go through, those are just, the other sheets are just details as to what make up each of those lines. Break it down by general fund, special aid fund, and the food service fund. As it relates to the expenditures, you'll see how we've classified those. Every month we go through and we true up our salaries. And as we mentioned when we start the budget process, we budget based upon average salary. After about October, when all people have been put in place, we go back and we adjust all those average salaries to actual salaries. So subsequent to October, all the salaries are actual salaries. So as you look at the line, as we go through, we always do a true up to see vacant position, people are moving here and there to what the actual salaries are, do the projection for the remainder of the year. Sometimes we have a give and take based upon how we hire people and how people leave the district. So on page number 10, as I mentioned a couple of months ago, we're starting to look at the budget comparison to see how we are trending current year as it relates to prior years. So if you look in the dark shaded area, that's where we were trending last year and how we compare to this year. So this year we are trending at 81.6% of our budget. Last year, we were trending at this time 78.9%. So we're about a percentage, maybe 2.1% higher than we are on our budget. But we still continue to monitor our budget and watch the expenditures. The next slide, slide 11, just basically highlights our capital summary report. And we are required by state regulation and state law to make sure that as we present the budget, we present all funds. Years ago, we never used to present the capital fund because we weren't aware of it, but starting about the last 2 years, that's what the capital fund is. Now, one of the things that you need to understand, I need to explain to you, and you need to understand, I need to explain is the capital fund are funds that gets accumulated year over year. And that's mainly the $10 million that the city requires us to set aside that we work on projects. So you'll see the H fund has a balance of $14 million. So that's the accumulation of the projects that we have been working on. Some of these projects take 1 year, 2 years, and sometimes they even go over. The K fund is the bond funds where we have gone out and do some bonding. And if you remember when we present the budget where we go out and borrow like $18 million then working with the city, some of the questions that have come up on that is, why are we paying for the rec centers when we borrow money? So that's where the funding from a bond comes in. And you will see items in, as you go through the detailed report, you will see some items in the H fund that has $0 all the way across. But because we had borrowed money on those and we haven't fully paid for the bond, we still have to keep all of those transactions on that report. So as you go through the detailed report, the H fund and the K fund, just from an educational point of view, that's what those are. And those are multi-year funding. And next is just the management action that we continue to hold on, hiring vacant position in central office, reviewing the school positions, continue to see if we can find efficiencies, and maintain our general fund, with the understanding that if there are grants that we can put cost in from a general fund, as long as we are not supplanting and we are supplementing, we can shift those funds. And that is the summarization. The detail is in the packet, so if you have any questions, you could ask those either now or get the questions to me, and we'll answer them at the regular board meeting. Any questions?
Any questions?
All right.
Nope.
Thank you.
And I just, I sat through the first audit committee, and I want to commend you and the whole staff on how clean actually the audit has been with having a $900 million budget. I've sat on many other times, smaller budgets, and the news isn't nearly as good.
And as Kathy said, we keep up with the GASBs, and if you notice, sometimes when I explain stuff, I tell you what the GASB said. Yeah. So we are up and up with those, and we go to seminars on the PD and know what they are. Some of them we have done early implementations because we see when we are in the process, we do it early so that we don't run into a problem at the end. One big one is the OPEB that we put on our books for the $500 million. So we're up on that.
Good job.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is data warehouse updates with SPA and Rock 3D.
Marie. Yep, Anne Marie.
I don't think so.
Bring this way down because Everton was just up here. Good evening, commissioners. Mahima is loading up the presentation, but while she does, I'm just going to kind of give you a background. So for those of you who are newer board members, commissioners, just to give you a little bit of history, and I promised Dan and Linda that I would keep this to 10 minutes, so I won't give you a whole lot of history, but a data warehouse implementation began 7 years ago, actually, and you've probably heard the term SPA, School Performance Analytics. You've probably seen some of the dashboards on SPA. So that was implemented, the implementation began 7 years ago, but with the data warehouse implementation, it never really ends, because as you bring in new data sources, you bring those new data sources into your data warehouse because your data warehouse is your primary reporting system for your organization. So SPA has been in existence for 7 years, but we actually have primarily student data that we have in SPA right now from 2006 forward, because that was the initial implementation of our current student information system. So it has grown and grown and grown over time, but it has still been on an old software release. So 7 years is a long time in the technology world, and so we have started the transition, what we're calling the SPA to Rock 3D transition. So you have seen some of Rock 3D. We implemented a very small portion of it back in September. We have the community Rock 3D and we have the internal Rock 3D. So community-based, it's aggregate data that it was the metrics or measurements that are tied to our district comprehensive instructional plan. So it allows the community to see how we are making progress towards achieving our DSIP goals. And then internally, what we also did at the same time was we upgraded some of the software release and we brought over the reports, and I don't know if you can see it, but we actually have about 1,500 reports right now in our data warehouse, and dozens of actual dashboards, multiple reports, sometimes 100 reports maybe on one dashboard. So what we have done so far is we've really just put them in that space, but in order to really do a true software upgrade, you really have to go through and you have to take everything that you have and you have to enhance it to use the newer technology. So that is what we're about to embark on. And Everton mentioned a few minutes ago, he was talking about the different funding sources. So he mentioned capital project funding. And when we do a major software upgrade or actually hardware upgrade as well in some cases, we use our capital project funding allocations. So it's not funding that can be used for anything else, it's project-based, and we do have the allocation set aside, we do have the budgeted amount for this upgrade. But I wanted to bring this before you today because I just wanted you to be aware it is a big expense, it is needed, and it is something that right now I can in all honesty say that is our primary reporting system within our district. So we have built in various levels of security in the data warehouse, so we have the highest level executive view, chiefs, directors, where they can see all data for all students and all schools, but then we have the security built in, so principals can see only student data for their own schools, and actually we have brought in some HR data at this time, very minimal, and it has been in the performance evaluation area. So principals can see the evaluations for their staff only. We even have another level of security for school administrators just below the principal, so they can't see those evaluations, but they can see the student data. So, and then we have aggregate views that we actually promote to the community. Yes, sure.
Just two questions. What, you said that it was expensive. I just want to know, like, the cost?
Yes.
And if that's going to be a repeated cost or just a cost right now because it's an upgrade, and then we may incur this cost in the future because it's another upgrade. So I'll start there, and then I just have one more.
Sure. So actually, I had the cost. I did put the cost on the first slide. This is really the main slide that I wanted to focus on.
Oh, it's right here,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, it's no problem. So it will be, it's a 2-year initiative because we are not just going to be upgrading and enhancing those dashboards that we currently have. We're going to really vastly expand this, and we're going to bring in data from financials. We've never done that before. And we're going to bring in additional HR data. So you can see some of the dashboards that we're going to build, the new dashboards in the area of diversity, in the area of tenure. We're going to bring in financial transparency. So that initial ROC 3D community that you saw, we're going to vastly expand that as well, and really bring financial transparency to our community by also putting dashboards out there for the community in the area of finance. We have never done that before. So it'll be $360,000 for the first and second years, and that's the development. And then after that, it'll be just maintenance and support for, I believe it's $120,000. My eyes are old, so I think that's what it is. But again, project funding for those first 2 years, that is the funding source that we always use for large initiatives, software, hardware initiatives.
Okay, and then the second question was around the security. So assistant principals don't get to see staff evaluations? Is that not part of their job scope? Just curious.
So they do not get to see, and that was something that, we didn't decide upon, but Harry might be able to speak to that. I think that they can only see those evaluations for that the principal has assigned to them, because I'm not 100% familiar with the process, but I know they don't see all evaluations for all teachers. The principal may divvy up some of the evaluations for some of the teachers that APs will do, but not all. The principal is the only one that can see all, and that's my understanding. Is that
Harry, yeah.
Harry?
Just kind of find that odd that assistant principal can't see staff evaluations.
So good evening. Part of the enhancements that Anne Marie has just shared is part of the changes and enhancements that we're making to the tenure process. So in essence, and we'll share that with you on next Thursday night, but we're making enhancements whereas the principals now have access. We're pushing data out to them so that they can, in essence, see at real time what the evaluations are, some of the performance metrics. So that is, again, going to be the conversation that we'll have next Thursday night in Executive Cabinet.
All right, thank you, Harry.
Yep.
So with this upgrade, because we are moving to a newer release of the technology, and it's Oracle-based technology, it's Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition, so it's a business analytics tool. It's also going to offer us some additional features that we don't have in the current technology. So what Harry mentioned about pushing out, right now principals and teachers and chiefs have to go to the data warehouse, open up a dashboard to look at a report. They don't have to run it, it's there for them, which is the beauty of having a reporting system, but they do have to go there. So now with this upgraded version, we're actually going to be able to push out alerts. So when it's something that's critically important, principals are going to get that alert, or chiefs, or it's going to be sent right to them, via email, and they'll open it up, and they won't have to go to their dashboard and sign in. It'll just be there. So that is one of the features, the newer features that's coming. And as well as, you're going to see this visually. I'm going to show you a sample of this as I just quickly go through the slides, but it will also give us the ability to take, maybe on one dashboard, we might have 30 reports. We can now take maybe 10 of those 30 reports, and we can combine them into one report because of the new features in this newer technology. So it's going to allow us for pivoting and more detailed filtering capabilities. So we can take one report or 10 reports and make it into one. So it's going to be a much cleaner look as well. So I'm just going to show you visually so you can see kind of where we are today. So these are just snapshots. You don't have to look at any of the data here, but these are just snapshots of our current SPA environment. These are some of the dashboards. So you can see, and when we implemented this initially, and even when we've added reports, the data's great, but it's, visually not as appealing as some of the newer technologies that are out there today. But back then it was, wow, it was great. You know, you can see charts and graphs. Again, these are just some of the current dashboards. But now we're starting into that Rock 3D. So here's a taste of what the newer version is going to look like for our entire system. And so this is the Rock 3D community that we released. But even this will be enhanced. Again, this is the same thing, Rock 3D. That's when you go into the next page of Rock 3D for the more detailed look at the metrics. But this is new Rock 3D. So this is what it's going to look like. So this is the executive view, and you see those along the side. There's kind of like a fanned out sheet. You'll be able to, you know, principals or chiefs will be able to click on those, and that's where they will get to the more detailed dashboards. But they're going to look like this. It's much more visually appealing, and it's not just visual. It's really the actual components that are part of the newer technology that are going to make these reports more robust. So these are just some additional looks. This is a sample. These are just prototypes, so this is not our data. But this is a school page. In comparison with what our school page looked like when you just saw that slide a moment ago, it's a lot different. Again, this is the student profile page. So a couple of slides ago, we had that student profile page that was right here. So, and we, of course, for this, we blocked out the student's name and their picture and all that for this. But you can see the difference. And this is not a real student of ours, that's why there's a picture here. But this is what it's going to look like going forward. Everything about that student will be on one page from the time they started with the district, with our district forward. So that's just a kind of a visual look. You can see the different features that are going to be available to make these reports much more robust.
And about the
Sure.
student piece, will there be an area where people can write notes?
Not here, because what this is, a data warehouse is it's not a transactional system, it's a reporting system. So it takes data in from as many data sources as you want, but it's not one to collect any data. But what we can do is, especially, we've created a Rock 3D page, so if you're thinking about getting feedback from the community, we've created a Rock 3D page on our website, and that's where the community can enter the actual environment. But on that page, we can collect feedback. We can put a survey out there that looks phenomenal. It doesn't even look like a survey, or just an open-ended with the ability for people to submit comments. So they will not be part of the actual application, but that's because it's a reporting system.
Yeah, for the outside, but I'm talking about for like, for students. And why I bring it up is because even part of the Roe report from the auditor from the state was that there was a breakdown in some of the communication and documentation. And I think that that's something that occurs with any student who may start at one school and transfer to another and transfer to another. I would just like to understand how we're documenting any concerns that we may have around a student who may be a transient student, and how do we address that? So if I'm transferring a student to another school and I have some concerns, and I want the other staff and teachers to know that there's some concerns and here's a heads up, like how do we communicate that if we're not communicating that within this system?
No, I understand now what you're coming from. So this system takes data from many systems. So it takes all of the data from our student information system. So what you're speaking about would be data that would be entered in the student information system, and that is possible.
Okay.
And so if we do build a page, we can build a custom page for that type of thing.
Just for notes.
Or,
Yeah,
and
general
then
notes.
that absolutely can be taken, and it can be available to whomever it should be available to, depending upon security.
But we
So-
would have to create it in another system and then program this system to collect that data as well.
It sounds more complicated than it really is. So it's possible right now within our student information system. And then what we do is we take the data from all of our systems, and we just build a process to put that data here. So it's really not that ultra complicated, but it absolutely
Okay.
can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this is kind of we're also going to, as I mentioned, we're also going to really enhance our public transparency piece. And I should also mention that we've based even our current environment on what LA Unified has done. So we've been following LA Unified for many years, and they're always a little bit ahead of us, but they happen to be using the same technology that we were, which is why we began with our SPA project initially. And they have migrated to this upgrade, and so we've kind of followed what they've been doing, and we've modeled after them because, you know, they have a lot more resources than we do, and so we're actually benefiting a lot from what they have already done. And if you ever have time and you want to go out on LA Unified's page, you can see what their public transparency piece looks like, and it's amazing. So, and that's what we want to model ours after, and that's what we plan to do. One of the other areas that I should mention, and I know Beth wants me to mention too, is one of those new dashboards that we're going to be adding for our receivership schools. Receivership schools have to identify metrics that they will use to, and that the state then will use to monitor their progress. So we're actually going to build one of the new dashboards to actually have all of the metrics that any of the receivership schools could select from, because they don't have to select all metrics, but we're going to make those available. So when they have to do those reports, and they have to periodically, you know, whether it's the state visits or whether it's, you know, internal monitoring, it's going to be there for them. No one's going to have to produce these reports for them. They're just going to be able to go to that page. So that's something that we also have in our next phase. So I think that's it for our data dashboard, unless you have any more questions. Then I have one more exciting thing to mention to you. Anything else? So for those of you that have been here a while, you know I've talked for many years and have tried to solve the problem of our students not having home internet access. And I think that we have finally solved this for our secondary, for our high school students at least. So this is the 1 Million Project. And the 1 Million Project through Sprint PCS has been around for a couple of years, and we actually looked into it as we've looked into every other potential solution to provide free home internet access for our kids. And at the time, at its inception, they really weren't large enough. They were, you know, they would consider you and maybe support one of your schools, so the students at one of your schools. But we didn't want to create another disparity by doing that. That really wasn't going to work for us. Well, they have vastly changed their foundation. Actually, it was started by Sprint PCS. It was the former CEO of Sprint PCS that has started the 1 Million Project. 1 million being they want to serve 1 million students who currently don't have home internet access. So it became so big that they became a foundation of their own, but Sprint PCS still is their backer, and all of the internet access rides on Sprint PCS's network for free. So about a month ago, we were looking at Sprint PCS's Connect Ed program, which we thought at that time was fantastic. And it would have provided our secondary students a number of them. They weren't sure how many they could support. We were still waiting for feedback from them. But it would have provided them home internet access, the monthly fees. They would have supported the monthly fees for 2 years. The district would have had to support the MiFi units that you plug into the wall that capture the signal. So we were going forward with that. We were still waiting on Sprint PCS to let us know how many they could support. But, you know, we were saying an estimate of about 40% of our secondary students would need it. So they weren't sure they could get to that number, and they were trying to get to serving 50,000 students, and they had been doing this for about a year, so they didn't know if they had that much left. Then comes the 1 Million Project, and our superintendent gets an email from the 1 Million Project Foundation, and he forwards it to me and says, should we look into this? And I was like, well, we did, you know, I'm wondering why, you know, so anyway, I brought it before Sprint, and they said, you have to be invited to the 1 Million Project. You weren't invited before, and now you have. So this looks like it's a better deal for you. So what this is going to give us is for all of our 9th through 12th grade students, 4 years of free home internet access. We do not have to pay for the MiFi units. They pick up the cost of the hardware and the monthly service. What we have to commit to is we have to commit to actually using this for students who need it. So what I mean by that is we can't just say we need 10,000, you know, MiFi units, you know, lit up. We can't say that. We have to actually do surveys of our students to see who needs it, and they want us to be their partner in monitoring the usage to make sure that kids are using it. Not to monitor what they're doing, but to just say, you know, are they actually utilizing the service? And not only that, this is offering 10 gig of data a month to our kids, where, you know, ConnectEd was 3 gig. And once and it's not just for the students either, their family members can use it as well. And it is filtered, it's SIPA compliant, so everything that is filtered internally here, it will be filtered through this as well. So they will not be able to access inappropriate content. And If they use up the 10 gig, they don't get shut off. So it goes down to a 2 gig kind of, and so they can still do their homework, they can still do internet searches, they just can't maybe stream movies. But so it goes down until the next month, and then they get another allocation of 10 gig. So it's really awesome. We have preliminary approval from the 1 million project. We have 2 more steps that we're working on right now, our implementation plan, and we have a document in the law office, terms and conditions agreement. But I'm hoping that within a month, I'm going to be coming to you and saying that we are approved, and we're going to be moving forward for the start of the school year. So.
Just want to say that is amazing, so thank you, and thank Dan for forwarding the email to follow through on that.
That's about all I did, but Anne Marie, it really is fantastic, and I'm a firm believer that everybody in the city should have access both in school and at home, and this is a first step, so thank you.
Okay, thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Yeah, I just have one.
Yes, sure.
Is it time limited? I mean,
4 years.
4
So,
years, okay.
and every year we will get new for the 9th graders, incoming 9th graders. So it's not an end, there's not an end to it. And what they actually told us is that you don't have to order only 1 time per year. So if you get new students, we allow you to order it 3 different times during each school year at whatever frequency you want. So for the initial implementation, what, of course, this is going to be tied to is our one-to-one. So right now, we have achieved a one-to-one in our schools, but we don't allow the students to take them home because we hadn't solved this issue yet, and we didn't want to create problems for the kids if they couldn't get access. So right now, every classroom has a Chromebook cart with 28 or 24 Chromebooks. So we actually have more Chromebooks than we have students because we had to supply them in the classrooms. So now what we're going to be doing is working with the school chiefs and working with the principals to decide on the plan to, okay, which schools will go first where we allow the students to take the Chromebooks home with their new MiFi unit, so that we probably won't do all at once. We'll maybe do 3 or 4 schools in September, and then maybe a few months later we will do the next round of schools. But as we have incoming students, if they transfer into the district, we can order them and include them in the next batch. So,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is presentation of the African American Studies curriculum. Yeah, we have them. Yeah, I have one. Does everybody have this in their packet?
Yeah.
I do. It was right behind the Rock 3D
I
packet.
don't, I actually, oh, no, I got it. I got the Rock review.
Good evening, Dr. Willis.
Good evening. On behalf of the Department of African American Studies at the Rochester City School District, in the presence of the board, executive administration that's here and present in the building, our teaching and learning staff under the tutelage of Dr. Cecilia Griffin Golden, just excited to be here and to give you a status update specifically on some of the curriculum efforts that have that are taking place currently within the Department of African and African American Studies. That's how you know he's still got a rookie. So in everything that we're doing, and we frame our work under the RCSD mission to provide a quality education that ensures our young students graduate with the skills to be successful in a democratic society and a global economy. And we really work within the auspice of the vision, which is recognizing each child by face and by name, every classroom, every school, to and through graduation. That piece resonates as a relationship piece, and we'll talk about some of the ways that this Pan-African curriculum is going to support some of those relationship-based ideologies. In order to frame the reason and the rationale for this class, created a problem statement, and so the role of African American Studies and African history in New York State, specifically in required social studies courses, is limited in its scope. And ultimately, we want to expose young folks, students, to Africa outside of the context of slavery by which they're initially introduced. We believe that that factors into them seeing who it is that they are in the context of history and society. And we also are working hard to reframe how history is taught, recognizing that if we bring these culture responsive opportunities to young folks, we'll really be able to foster the motivation for learning. Some of the touch points, and you'll see this in your document later, please recognize that this presentation PowerPoint here is also in concert with an appendix, and so all of the supporting documents will be underneath Appendix A. Some of the touch points for the mission, really to expose students to a rich and diverse African history, not only the heritage, but the philosophies, and doing so through emancipatory pedagogies, question-based, query-based design, so that students are able to think critically, not only about what's going on and what's being presented to them in history, but also some of the reasons and rationales for why things have taken place historically here in the United States and beyond. For the vision, we want to make sure that everything that we do is aligned to New York State social studies standards. We want to be very clear that the African diaspora is worldwide, and we have patterns of migration into other areas and parts of the world. And relative to our students, we really want them to have a sense of self-respect, and we're trying to foster that through them seeing themselves in the curriculum. The theory of action document that you're going to get is really like a collective cause and effect. We subscribe to the fundamental tenets. We believe that if we cultivate culture-responsive learning opportunities and we provide accurate resources, that we cultivate a classroom environment with positive images of people in history, if we create highly engaging classrooms that are research-based, where students are required to think critically and to analyze, and if we support teachers through professional development and technical assistance, then we will most certainly get a return on our investment in terms of fostering student motivation, increasing academic outcomes through engagement processes, and really allowing our young folks to see themselves as the producers of knowledge. The Pan-African curriculum specifically, Part 1, which is scheduled for fall 2019, beginning of humanity, and all the way up until the time of the pre-transatlantic slave trade, right around 1490 time period. And the Part 2, we're hoping to have ready for spring 2020, which is the post-transatlantic slave trade, and all the way up and through contemporary society. The curriculum overview document that you're going to get is really just the 10,000-foot view of what this curriculum is, the fact that it's culture responsive and student-centered, the Pan-African course description. Some of those touch points that are important is that it's interdisciplinary. There's a technical writing piece and research-based methodologies that are embedded in this social studies program. We also have some cross-curriculum things with other departments to lift up that lived experience of the African diaspora around the world. The class is structured through the course description as exploratory, recognizing that our children haven't had opportunities to be exposed in the way in which we're trying to expose them to this curriculum. Our unit outline for the Part 1 of the Pan-African curriculum starts with classical beginnings in Unit 1. It'll move along to colonialism and imperialism for Unit 2. That African migration and the patterns throughout the world will be Unit 3. Cultural unity and the philosophies that are underneath and provide an undercurrent for those. West Africa, Unit 5, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, which is well documented in the social studies curriculum. We'll also be doing some refinement in those areas as well. And lastly, European slave trade. The Pan-African Studies Competencies documents shapes what the students will know. Again, that's kind of like the 10,000-foot view, and we get more granular in the learning outcomes document, what students will know and be able to do. And you can track that in Appendix B. The draft lesson plan, that's inclusive of differentiation and opportunities for differentiation. And that also speaks to students' learning styles. So we have some things that are more tactile, some things that are more visual. So we're making sure that we're thinking critically about how we introduce students to this exploratory type work around things that they don't know through the ways in which that they learn. And we think that that's really, really important. Our implementation plan that you'll see on the last slide will really just outline how busy the department will be over the course of the next year. With truncated busyness here in the summer. and as a ramp up and a rollout to what's going on in fall 2019. So we talked about that first bullet that you'll see here, the African and African diaspora elective. This is a partnership between the Department of African American Studies and the Social Studies Department. And we have other curriculum projects that are going on simultaneously while this class is being developed. We have a social studies 7th and 8th grade infusion class. The reason and rationale we chose the social studies 7th and 8th grade infusion is because they don't have state-based tests in those years, and we felt that it at least gave us an opportunity to bookend some of the work that's being done at the K2 level as well as the Pan-African class. So now we have something going on at our middle school level, and it also keeps teachers maybe from feeling like they're up against pacing charts and some of the other day-to-day curriculum pacing. Some of the projects that we're working on with IM&T, in addition to the Department of Multilingual Education, is cultural responsiveness. And so these classes are going to be offered online to teachers to help build out their awareness and understanding of ways in which they can be responsive to their student and to our student community. We're also going to talk about the alignment between the Afro and the Afro-Caribbean resistance movements, recognizing that resistance in the diaspora and across the world are both passive and active, and in many cases they're really well documented, and so we want to lift up some of those resistance movements. One of the unique things, and really just a byproduct of being entrusted, is the Harambe curriculum development and refinement that'll need to be done, that takes place ahead of our summer school for July 1. We added the 8th grade, so last summer, to my understanding, it was offered at the K through 7. We're also including 8th grade, and so there'll need to be some curriculum work underneath that in order to support our summer school efforts. Music and Arts Department, those classes that you see listed have an infusion piece as well, really lifting up the experience of those people within our history, really, musicians and artists that haven't had the level of attention that they deserve, and working side by side with Dominic, who's taken the lead on the project, our directors of arts, but providing support services for that curriculum piece as well. Another one of the projects that we've been able to do from a curriculum standpoint is our work with CTE. Ms. Neal, Rhonda Neal, has been very proactive and inclusive in allowing me the opportunity to come and not only speak to her CPPS program, but also do a workshop model where they bring in their curriculum and we talk about access points for culturally responsive efforts. We talk about ways in which they can onboard considerations. And so we were able to do that, complete that project, but we know under CTE there's other programmatic umbrellas, and so we have a continuation plan to continue to work across those efforts as well. You know, this next slide is really talking about projects that support curriculum efforts. And so text selection and our pre-K text selection process was a project that we're really excited about and have been excited about, that already has pre-identified culturally responsive textbooks from Dr. Noma Lemoyne, who works foundationally with African American language and syntax. And we were able to put a team together of stakeholders here at the district level to talk about what books are most appropriate for our kids here. We were able to separate those to the 3rd and the 4th grade pre-K level, or excuse me, 3-year-old and 4-year-old pre-K. Considerations around classroom libraries, their overall book libraries, what books we wanted for read aloud. So we were really meticulous and in my estimation, extremely thorough with being able to put that out to get those books into schools, which there are now. And there's also a continuation across many other ethnic backgrounds, such as Somalian, so on and so forth. Our ELA, and you'll see there's a few different projects going on. We have a K-5 literacy curriculum writing team, in addition to aligning what we did with the pre-K text selection to our kindergarten. So it's been well documented that alignment between pre-K and kindergarten needs to strengthen. One of those efforts that we see being able to do just that is taking those texts that we were able to identify at the pre-K level and having those be the seminal or the guiding text at the kindergarten level, but teaching kindergarten techniques. For example, spatial allocation, next to, in front of, instead of maybe just rote reading and decoding that they would do at the pre-K level. And so, although it's a very small detail, a kid walking into the classroom at the kindergarten level and feeling like they already have familiarity with the text will allow them the bandwidth, hopefully, so that they feel comfortable in stepping out and being able to present what it is that they are to know or work on what it is that they are to know. The work with our special ed department, the Foundational Language Enrichment Program, has been going on for about 9 months. So our speech teachers push in twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays into our kindergarten classrooms. This fall, they'll push into our kindergarten and our first grade classrooms. And there's also a growth model to continue it at the second grade level. We've been, myself and Miss Amanda Caminiti have been really thoughtful about, so they use a core curriculum that helps guide their instruction. We've been talking about ways in which we can think critically around some of the ways in which that curriculum can be enhanced in order to take on the understandings of the population of students that will be before them, and our students specifically. This project has an ongoing shelf life, and so we're continuously thinking about, you know, what things we put in front of teachers and what things we put in front of students, and how we combine those two. The new teacher hire and relational capacity training has already had over 20 sessions and almost 350 hires, and so this is the district's attempt at really being thoughtful behind the considerations for when we bring somebody into the district. Do they have the awareness training that is necessary for them to be able to do the job? Sometimes we know that individuals may or may not feel prepared once they get here, and we're trying to mitigate that by developing this curriculum. The Department of Teaching and Learning and Curriculum Council, again, this is just understanding the brass tacks and the bones behind what is curriculum writing, what is our obligation, and I've been blessed to be a part of that team. And East DPO, Culturally Responsive School Environment, is really a project that's going on with East DPO, where we are utilizing Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God as a model for how it is we're going to construct an art-based culturally responsive project where not only the students at East, but also the overall community will be able to enjoy and really learn from the artwork that's being done there. Lastly, as I mentioned before, it's just an outline of some of the dates that are salient for our department, Department of African American Studies, over the next few months, and really grateful for the opportunity to be able to talk to you tonight, so thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yep. Commissioner LeBron?
Anybody else have questions first? Are you guys okay?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I do have a few questions. In this report, it states Appendix A. It has references to additional exhibits, appendixes, but we don't have that additional. Oh, Dr. Golden has them. Thank you. Oh, okay. That would have been helpful to have some cross-reference while he was talking, but thank you. Because I had lots of questions around that. In the pages are not numbered. I just want to add a little tip about that in the future. But in the second to last page, you mentioned the ELA kindergarten and pre-K curriculum. I just needed to understand how that fits into the Marvelous Mind Academy curriculum. And if you guys are working together, if there's a relationship, a correlation there. The new teacher hire, my understanding is that there is a racial bias training requirement. How does that fit into that? Doesn't fit into that? Is this in addition to that? I can start there. I'll wait for those two answers.
Sure, and so the new teacher hire and the relationship capacity, I believe they offer a 3-part series, of which I am one part of that series. I know that Ms. Turner does implicit bias training, as well as some of the work through Tony Jordan. So I'm one piece of that three-part triangle for the new teacher hire. And to speak to your previous question, I believe it was it VMA that you were asking about?
Yes, the VMA curriculum and program that specifically is for K through 2, and I see you're going to be going into kindergarten and pre-K curriculum. And if you guys are working together, is there a relationship, a correlation? I just need to understand the additional curriculum, how that's all fitting together.
Yes, so this work that you see here is separate from the Victorious Minds Academy curriculum work, although I am privy to, because I sit on some of the executive level teams that think about Victorious Minds Academy, its application in our city school district. But these projects aren't that curriculum writing.
Okay. Is there a reason? Can I just ask that? Is there a reason why they're not working together, or?
So
Okay.
we work together, but the actual curriculum writing
Curriculum is
pieces
gonna
that
be
are
separate.
here, the curriculum piece is a separate piece, and I think that that's because they were working on that prior to my coming to the district some 11 months ago.
Okay.
Commissioner Hallmark?
Yeah, so I have a few questions too.
Sure.
I had the similar question about the new hires. Those are mandated? The
It is
training?
now,
Okay.
yes, ma'am, to my understanding.
Okay. And also about the IMT, the online training, what are the expectations around that or the incentives around that for teachers?
I think the traditional incentive here at the district is the professional development hours, and once you accrue X
So it
amount of credits.
satisfies the required hours?
Correct.
But they can pick and choose?
Right, and so
No, you go ahead.
I would just say that we would want, depending on how we apply ourselves as a district to our professional development efforts, there's means by which to bring people in the fold that would benefit from that.
Right, so
style
we're
of
grabbing the
training.
new hires, but we're talking about the older teachers too, and so how we can incentivize that. Maybe
Yeah.
they should have more weighted credit, I don't know.
Yeah,
So it'd be more
yes,
attractive or
absolutely.
something,
I concur.
you know? Okay, so that was one. The summer school, okay, so the Harambe, there's a supplement that's happening in the summer school. Across the board, all kids in all the summer school programs, and how many students is that? Or is it selected, piloted, like what?
So, no ma'am, not all kids across all schools. Specifically the Harambe program, it's based on a previous model. Because we added an 8th grade this year and was only K through 7, there's some work that needs to be done to complete that band, curriculum work that needs to be done for our 8th graders, as well as some refinement on the previous stuff that I was given. And so,
But the plan is for all students going into summer school, they would have
for all
exposure
Harambe students,
to,
200 students, yep,
there would,
in
all the summer
Harambe
school
program.
students would have exposure to this? That's the plan?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Also curious about the music and arts department. That's under development, and what, is there kind of a timeline on that? Like, I'm just curious, more details on that one.
Yeah, so there's some curriculum writing that, so long as the board sees fit, that'll be done over the course of the summer. I don't know to what extent that rollout will be of those classes. Some of it will be for fall 2019, but I can definitely take those notes and get that information back to you.
Okay, I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely.
Because I'm big into arts integration, so. And just to kind of review, you said something about the pre-K text selection, and I'm happy to hear that Lemoyne's work is being, she's being used as a consultant for the text selection, and I hope that, I'm not sure the terminology, the dual language kind of teaching stuff is happening in there.
Yeah, and so we're doing the best we can to just be thoughtful about how it is that we apply ourselves to all of our students for the.
Okay, and then also what you started with the first curriculum with the more high school age, the 7th, 8th on up.
Yes, ma'am.
We've been having conversations about curriculum and uniform curriculum across the district, and this sort of made me think, okay, there's all this writing going on, and we're talking about uniform. Was that mostly, the uniform is mostly in ELA and math, but then social studies is different, or like, I'm just curious, I'm just a little confused.
So this is an elective class, right? It's not right? This is a New York State-based curriculum. This is an elective class. So it's an accoutrement that students that have the bandwidth in their master schedule can take on this class if they're interested in taking this class. So it
In what grades?
9 through 12, high school level, yes, ma'am.
But it'll be offered in every school, in every building?
Yes, ma'am. At the
And-
high school level.
So then how do you push it out to the social studies teachers
So
so that it can be offered in every building?
and I think it's done just through that, in concert with the Director of Social Studies, Steve Lamort.
Steve
and
Lamort,
really just ensuring that we're being as thorough as possible to get it out there in the market and to make sure it's on the master schedule and there's no snafus and all that stuff that it
So you're
takes.
keeping track that all the teachers in all the buildings have exposure to this and opportunity to be able to teach it, should it be elected by students?
Yes, ma'am. It's on the implementation plan for the professional development. So we're going to be working with those individuals that have that vested interest at the school building level that have been identified as going to facilitate this Pan-African curriculum and ramping them up to, A, the curriculum, the facilitation, the lens, the thought processes, the essential understandings.
Because it seems like elections are a whole subject, right? Elective courses are a whole subject, but this seems like it should have more weight than most elective courses. You know what I'm saying? I mean, elective courses, I don't know what percentage of the student population takes elective courses. I'd like to see a higher percentage of students be pushed or
Influenced,
recommended or
yeah.
advised by counselors, and then it has higher weight than just your regular elective courses, which, I don't know, the word elective always means like
Choice.
minimal, or, yeah. Or I don't know what percentage of students take our elective courses.
We're going to be
That's
working to
just my
garner
question.
that level of support,
Uh-huh.
and we look forward to having that level of support relative to rolling out the
Do you need more of a push from the board on this?
We're going to push as hard as we can. So, you know, I know that Dan and Dr. Golden, they have an acute lens on this and the importance of it in the context of what we're doing here for our kids.
Ask for clarity,
Yes, ma'am.
in terms of the elective, can you weigh an elective more for students? I thought that we can weigh more professional development for staff, but can we weight the electives for students? She's saying, well, not she, Commissioner Hallmark is saying, as an incentive for students to weigh the elective a little bit more. Did you mean in terms of giving it a higher credit for the elective?
Well,
or-
I'm not proposing a solution, I'm just, these are questions. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how much, I'm not a counselor, I don't know how much room in students' schedules they have for electives. You know, what percentage of students are able to take electives, what we can do to encourage these particular kind of elective courses. These are just questions.
Yeah.
I hear you. And so there are opportunities for many students to take electives, and there are many electives from which to choose. Encouraging students and families, letting them know about the African American and African Studies options needs to be done with students as well as families, and the professional development of teachers so that they feel comfortable with teaching the course as well. So it's those three things that we have to
Right.
do.
They need to be ready to teach.
Yes.
But we also need the counselors in on it too, right?
Oh, no-
Or
no doubt.
Advisors, yeah.
Yep,
so.
no doubt.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Davis?
I just have one question. Do we have an
Yes, ma'am.
evaluation process? For example, is there a process for determining the impact of the menu for building relational capacity among new teachers?
Within the relational capacity bullet, or within the context of the Pan-African class, do we have measures to assess?
Right, within the
So,
Pan-African class.
Within the
is there a way
Pan-African
to-
class, you'll
to
see on the
measure?
implementation plan, all of them have a measure by which to assess, and we also have internal. So we have like a pre-post test for teachers to take for them to gain a sense of whether or not they have an understanding of the kids that are before them. And we also have rubric-based assessments for really helping to steer and frame for teachers the lens by which they should be evaluating student progress and processes.
And then the persons that would evaluate the teacher in the classroom, they're well-versed in this to be able to see the impact of having taken these courses. They'll see the difference in the classroom.
I hope that the outcome-based data will lend itself to that there has been an improvement of them understanding who the students are that are in front of them, that they know that their family backdrop, that they have those personal understandings of the students.
Yeah. So I mean like the principals, the persons who would be evaluating the implementation of the new skills that they've developed. Are they well-versed on what the Pan-African is trying to do?
What Pan-African, so Commissioner, I'm hearing two questions. And correct me if I'm wrong. One is, how do we measure the effectiveness of the new hiring process, which includes implicit bias, cultural responsiveness?
Right, the three-part series that he talked
Okay. So in response to that, the Charlotte Danielson framework that is used explicitly includes culturally relevant, culturally appropriate engagement with students. School principals and assistant principals do the evaluations of teachers. They also receive the necessary education around the framework in total, as well as, in particular, the cultural responsive aspect. So that's how we measure on that part. The second question that you're asking, I think, around how do we measure how well teachers understand the African and African American studies courses, that would come from our students in particular. We have students who want these types of courses, and the extent to which they do well in those courses, feel engaged. I think those are probably our best indicators of how well we're doing with those courses. And the number of students who take those courses is another indicator. Okay?
Commissioner Shepard?
So on the implementation action plan template, on the back page, it talks about exit surveys, self-reflection for the model and the instructional practices. Now it says see appendix culturally responsive rubric. Do we have that with us?
I can get that for you.
Okay.
That's not attached. It's a little cumbersome because it's a thicker document, but I will definitely get that to wherever it needs to be so you guys have that to reflect on.
Okay. And have you guys created a plan in regards to what the PD is gonna look like for not only teachers but also principals, as you spoke about? Because I'm just looking at the different bullets for the curriculum projects that you're working on, and I know that you're trying to roll this out. A lot of this stuff is getting rolled out in the fall of 2019. So I'm just wondering if they'll be prepared before then.
So, yes, ideally, the first part of your question was?
The first part of the question is, do you have a plan on how you're gonna roll out PD for the staff that is gonna be responsible for this?
So, yes, ma'am. First part will be exposure to the curriculum and really the brass tacks under that. The second part will be the learning outcomes and all of the expectations for those. And the third part, and again, this is ongoing, so teachers should be getting ongoing curriculum, professional development all the way through this year and 2020. And the last part is really just talking to them about the lens by which, or the essential understandings we want them to have as instructors of record when teaching our young folks about this specific curriculum. So, three-pronged.
Vice President Elliott?
Let me just first start off by commending you, Dr. Willis, and Dr. Golden for this work. I really do appreciate all this, what's been done. It's been thought out and seemed to be ready for implementation. But as I was listening, some other thoughts came to me in terms of how do we move this forward. So I will share these things for consideration in some kind of way of including it into curriculum. For example, white pathology, and I have to give credit to Clifford Florence, who talked about white pathology, and it's resonated with me. Why do, and I'm talking about the system now, why do white people hate black people? I think we need to be able to investigate that. What have they been taught, and why have they been taught to hate black people? And why do we as black people take that on? So I think somewhere down the line, we have to have some kind of courses around white pathology, because it can't be one-sided, right? I mean, we learn who we are, but we also have to figure out why white people do what they do and what's causing them to do what they do. Because I think that's the only way in which, in a society of ours, particularly when you have white people that say, well, why do you act the way you act? Or something to that effect, right? And so it is important that we understand, that our children understand why white people do what they do, right? We've never, I get some questions all the time about these questions from white people, and now what I've told my people is you ask them, why do they ask what they ask, right? So that we can understand what's really the thinking behind that. So I think it's important that we look at white pathology, right? Course on that. I also think it's important for us to look at police brutality, right? All that may be a part of that. Why is police? I mean, we need to be preparing our children about how to protect themselves in the cases of police brutality. What's the racist thinking of police officers who don't even live in our community but come in to destroy our community? We need to be teaching our children about that. Now, if we can do that in this kind of a setting, I think it's going to be important to have far more of resonance with our students.
I would just.
So I'm just I'm for the future. All I'm saying is this is for the future.
I appreciate your comments, and it's never easy having courageous conversations, but we'll definitely do it.
I'm not done though. So I also think we need to consider around this whole thing of African American studies, some independent kind of courses. So to allow our students on their own to go out and do their own research and give them credits for the research that they have done. I tend to think that they can do their own research better than we can even teach it to them. So I think that that's going to be important. I also think that it's going to be important to look at the psychological devastation of racism and some way talk about that in some kind of course. I don't know what that looks like, but I think
trauma.
There you go. So that may be in Ruth's department, that we have to look at the trauma. I know Amos Wilson talks a lot about psychological slavery and the impact that racism has on. How does one overcome inferiority? How does a black person overcome inferiority in a nation that is based on white power and white supremacy? So those are the kinds of poignant issues I think we really, in addition to the history, and I think that's important for the foundation, but I also think that there has to be, and I don't know if we bring in people to have those conversations or how we do that, but I think if we're going to have some viable, rich and enable our students to be strong in this nation where racism is raised its ugly head, we have to have them to be able to protect themselves and to protect themselves psychologically. It is important that when white people ask you, well, why do your people do this and that, the other, that you could tell, or why don't your people have history? That we could tell them that we do have history, but you erased it from the history books, right? So those kinds of questions. So I just share that for future continued planning and these kinds of offers that I think that can be rich once we develop the foundation of this. Those are other kinds of courses I think that we need to be offering our students.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, Commissioner Hallmark.
So I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Elliott. It seems like you're talking about connecting the dots between African history and African peoples, and then institutional racism in particular. In fact, yesterday was a conversation at the conference that happened, the Rochester Beacon, where the speaker mentioned a book called The Color of Law about housing, redlining and all that, and just how it's important to connect the dots and understand the history of more current stuff and how it connects back. So anyway, good points.
Commissioner Powell?
I want to thank you very much, Dr. Willis. This is a very thorough report. It looks like you've been very busy since you arrived. I think that we're going to find that this is an iterative process, that I hope very much that after delivering this Pan-African course elective in the fall, we'll get feedback directly from students and from teachers that will allow it to be even richer the following offering. Absolutely. Including the points that Commissioner Elliott raised, if they're not already baked in. I think that in the next offering it will be, just because the students are going to see what's missing, and hopefully if our eyes are open, we'll see it and respond to it. I'm also especially gratified to hear you say it be offered as an elective grades 9 through 12. A lot of times when our kids get scheduled, eyes aren't open to all the possibilities. When I was going through high school, I got myself into a drafting class that generally was populated by seniors who took the course because they had ample room in their schedule and no conflicts. So I was the youngest person in the drafting class. But, that was allowed to happen because I took an active role in my scheduling. So to the extent that our students actively participate in building their schedules and filling their schedules, I know that in the experience of my children, their engagement in their schedule varied widely. And some of my kids, their schedules were full up because the school wanted those schedules full and didn't want kids in study halls, but they weren't necessarily engaged in class work that they were excited about. So to the extent that this can be offered truly 9 through 12, and so that you get the full range of ages as well, and so long as the schedule can make that happen, this has the potential for being really, really rich stuff.
Thank you.
And I wish you well.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
I just want to add and hold up what Vice President Elliott said. I won't speak long about it because there really isn't enough time to do that, but I have spent the last 2.5 weeks in courts throughout this community, one in Wyoming County doing a criminal trial, and then more recently in state Supreme Court in a civil trial, both of them involving allegations of police abuse and misconduct. And I got to tell you, I don't think I've ever been so drained in my entire life. And that's me laboring over a case or cases where I wasn't the one assaulted. I wasn't the one who was threatening to go to jail. I wasn't the one whose jaw was wired shut for 6 months. So I think, I know you got a lot on your plate, and you've done a lot, as my colleagues have remarked, but I think Vice President Elliott is right, and I think everybody here would concur with her that we need to shore up our children for what is out there. And it's out there. I'm telling you, it's out there. And by the way, this trial that I'm on right now, my client at the time was 16 years old, a student at Franklin, and he didn't finish after this. His jaw was wide. He could only drink liquid foods for 6 months. And he is just one of literally thousands of young people who come into these walls in this district and are expected to learn and then walk out and expected to be contributing members to society. So again, I think Vice President Elliott and everybody, we can see that you've done a good job thus far. But if you're really looking forward to this, providing our students, you gotta get to this issue of racism, and I'm not saying you aren't already, and you gotta get to the development of some curriculum or staff or professional development that would shore up our children. And as Vice President Elliott, I'm sure other people would say, provide a sense of awareness from others who would do such things to our children, or who would raise children who would be police officers to do such things. This is, and I know you all know this because y'all deal with this every day, but there are just no words to describe what I think, forget the physical damage, the emotional damage that was done to this young boy. He's now a grown man, he's got 2 children, and he's got to raise them, right? So get to that work as soon as possible, but I would say to you, seems like we've all sort of watched this department sort of start and stop, and it sounds to me like you've really got a plan going, and and everything from the selection of textbooks, which we've argued over and debated about for years, and this capacity training. And I know you wouldn't take credit for it. Dr. Golden and a lot of other people are doing some good work. That's unprecedented in this. Maybe it's not the only answer, but that's good work. So on behalf of the board, thank you for your work and everybody who's working with you. And I know I certainly look for continued updates. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And Dr. Willis, great job, but don't be afraid to come back to this board and ask for the resources that you need to make sure. No, not till
Next time.
after July 1, but
Very well then. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's take some of the resources from that East project that we just voted on.
Let it go, let it go.
Yeah, man.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is Resolution 834. I need a motion to discuss.
Motion.
Second.
Been moved by whoever, Commissioner LeBron, seconded by
Hallmark.
Commissioner Hallmark. Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding Resolutions 834? I would only add, I want to thank BWP for their effort. I've been asked repeatedly about the pool of applicants, and there were a lot of good applicants. I know some people try to pick apart some of these people's careers, but I think they have, all 4 gentlemen stood the test of time for public service. Are they perfect? No, but nobody in this room in this city is perfect. And I think we can say that while we had, as members of the Board of Education, had some disagreement on the process, I think in the end, I think you will see in the vote that there is overwhelming consensus about the person. And that's okay to have differences on the process, but it's important that we get behind the person, and I think you will begin to see evidence of that tonight. I finally want to tell my colleagues that I have been very blessed, and I want to thank you for being in a position to talk, as I am charged to do, with this candidate that I believe you will, this contract that you will support tonight. And he is extremely anxious and looking forward to working with us. And he already, as you all know, because you participated in the interview, has looked at the DE report and all the stuff that we've done, including the retreats that we've had. And he understands the importance of that work. And one idea that he and I discussed, and I can't imagine there'll be a single person who would disagree with it, is because the DE's report, and we've done these retreats, he suggested, and I'm in the process of trying to, and nothing's been done, but since we all have talked about retreats, what better thing could we do as a Board of Education to signal to this community that we are going to work together as a team to do a retreat before he even begins his work? And I have been in contact with some philanthropic organizations who could, and I'm not just talking about a Saturday from 12 to 3, that have some philanthropic organizations to pay for a serious retreat. The superintendent, Dr. Dade, soon to be Dr. Dade, the Board of Education, and whoever he deems appropriate, go into some area where we're not bothered by phone calls, and figure out how do we come together as a family, how do we provide a vision for this district. So I've gotten some good responses from some philanthropic organizations. I took the chance of making the calls and actually talking to Terry about it, because I know we've already agreed that retreats are important. So I look forward to, and he looks forward to, that being our first step as a family to continue the improvements that this district has experienced. Any other questions or comments regarding resolutions 834? There being no further questions or comments, all those in favor of resolutions 834 say. Do we have a motion? Yeah, there was. Yeah, there was a motion. Yeah. No, there was a motion. Commissioner LeBron.
It went fast.
It went really fast. All those in favor of resolution 834 say aye. Aye. Any nays? You caught that, Madam Clerk? Okay, there is a need to go into executive session, but before I get that motion, you would note that the agenda marks a number of meetings that will take place over the course of the month of May. So now at this time, I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss the appointment of a particular person and to get guidance from our legal counsel. Is there such a motion?
Second.
Commissioner LeBron, seconded by Commissioner Hallmark. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Ladies and gentlemen, we will adjourn from downstairs. If you want to talk or see us, you'll have to wait downstairs on the second floor. If not, have a very blessed and good evening. Thanks.
Wants to be. Aliyah is not just that, she is one of our honor students. And when her name came up, it was just like joy for everyone who heard the name, because she's come a long way, and we are very proud of Aliyah Marble.